Hey, good morning. Today is Thursday, June the 20th, 2024, and the time now is 9 a.m. The African diplomacy is in such a bad shape. We are not training the young people in Africa. And one thing that I will say, all the African countries, most especially the black African countries, need to work together and create an institutions or an institute for the studies of leadership. Okay? Let me just say something like that. An institute of leadership. In this case, it basically allowed African nations without the resources to still partake in a conference, in an institutions where they are able to send certain assigned number of young men and women to go and study leadership and diplomacy every year. And these men and women will return to their countries, basically become the leaders that will basically lead the various institutions in these countries. So I think it's it is going to be the future of Africa and institutions, because the majority of African countries cannot afford it. They do not have the resources. By creating a general Africanized institutions of studies and practice of management, leadership, and so on, and business, finance, economics, it enabled the rich and powerful countries such as Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Ethiopia, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria to be the number one, number two, and so contributor of the system, so that every one of the African countries can be able to train their young men and women, and young men and women of leadership in Africa, or future leadership in Africa, can mingle, can know each other, can practice the craft of business, economics, finance, leadership, administration, and so on and so on. And this also includes language. Whether we are talking about the African languages, traditional African, indigenous African languages, or African languages that came about as a result of colonialism and so on, or whether we are talking about Islam, Christianity, we are talking about Arabic, English, French, Portuguese, Germans, or so on, or so on, and so on. And this idea came to me. I remember as a Liberian, I was in China, 2014. A friend of mine, best friend of mine, we went on vacation in the summer. I remember we were there during the World Cup, and it was a good time. We were in China. But we visit the Liberian embassy, and there was a Chinese lady working in the embassy. Now, you have her office, you have the ambassador's office, and I think the assistant or deputy ambassador's office. So she is basically in the embassy. She was a translator. And I felt very sick to the matter. Now, it is a reality that foreign citizens work in the various embassies around the world. But this lady was in the embassy of Liberia, and she was doing translation. She seemed to be a good lady, and I spoke with her. But let's assume that she was a spy. Let's assume that she was actually working for her government, her country. Then in this case, Liberia or any countries could be cheated. So the solution in this case, create an institutions in the various African countries, or in general. All the African countries will galvanize, put their resources, allocate resources together, create an institutions where young Africans are trained in the business of democracy, diplomacy, business, finance, administration, and language or languages. So in this case, African countries can send young people around the world to represent them as diplomats, having studied at home in Africa the various fields of diplomacy and international relations and language. In this case, we have our own translators, African translators, who had studied the various languages. We have people who are representing African or African countries in various countries and don't even know what the hell they are doing. They have no skill in the in diplomacy or in the languages of the countries they are representing their countries in. But I'm going to end there. Thank you very much for watching The Echoing Voice. Peace.